So I think to kind of go back a step, everyone's grief and experience of grief is unique, and also there are kind of commonalities amongst people's grief. But the level of the loss tends to fit the level of the emotional investment and the significance of the person in your life. So that if this is someone who was the love of your life, or the most important person in your life, then that is the quantum level of the loss that you're experiencing. So that's an enormous loss. And we can, the most kind of common way of coping is trying not to feel the pain of loss, trying to block the pain. But unfortunately, how our brain works and how we work as human beings is that in order to find a way of adjusting and adapting, accommodating to this loss, so you don't forget and move on, but finding a way of living with it, the mourning, the act of grieving, is by allowing these difficult, painful emotions to come through our body and force us to face this new reality that we don't want and we don't choose. And all of us from our early years will have our most natural default way of coping with difficulty. So that if we learned by observing through our parents, that you learn to deal with your emotions and difficulties by shutting them down or anesthetizing them or acting them out or doing a combination of the two, that will be your natural default mode of coping. And also, so what helps, first of all, rather than also, is to be aware of what you tend to do when you're suffering, when you're in pain. Do you tend to get very busy? Do you tend to retreat from people? Do you tend to shut down or anesthetize? And it isn't not allowing that tendency, it's being aware of it and then recognizing what do you also need to develop and add on so that you can have the best support that you can given this devastating loss. And the model that I use, so I'll get to about being stuck in a minute, but the model that I use is the theoretical model of Strobe and Shute, is the dual process. And what that talks about is that at the moment of the loss, whatever it is, we oscillate, we move between loss orientation, where we emote and grieve and feel the pain, and restoration orientation, where we have a break from the grief, where we get on with daily tasks, where we have hope for the future. And it's the movement between the two that frees us to adapt and change. So that if we create times where we focus on our grief and we intentionally remember and mourn and feel our pain, we then can give ourselves permission to intentionally spend time getting on with daily tasks, for doing things that kind of release you in a way, like seeing a friend or exercise or listening to something or doing something that feels positive. Having a break from it then gives you the psychological energy and go back and do the loss work. What I encourage, and I very much encourage this in the app, is that all of us need to develop our own toolbox and pillars and ways of supporting ourselves, given that we have our own unique way of dealing with our difficulties. And so the 8 pillars are in the app, and these pillars of strength are really important in order to be able to, for instance, unstick us. Because when we get stuck, it can be that we can get caught in a ruminating loop that keeps us loss-oriented, where we're only looking back and we look to the future with fear and kind of dread. And the fear and the kind of pain that we feel and the loss feels like we're drowning often, and we don't have the psychological energy, or sometimes it's the permission or the attitude that gives that allows us to have hope for the future. So the importance isn't how much you have hope for the future, but that you have some movement between the two, because that is what protects you from being stuck.